Making a new project is easy in Cubase, but it's important to understand the folder structure so that you know what all the extra files are for. When you launch Cubase, it starts off with a blank screen, unless you have the general preferences set so that Cubase loads up the Last Project or Show Open Options dialog. For this example, we're using the setting Show Open Options dialog. Let's choose New Project from the File menu. The Templates dialog box pops up. Cubase comes with predefined templates, and you can create your own. Templates save you time by providing you with a preset structure that you can start from. We'll show you how to create templates later in this series. For now, let's choose Empty and click OK. Choose a location on the hard drive where your new project folder will be stored. For every project you create, you need to store it in a different folder. Make sure you are not storing all of your projects in the same folder. This will only lead to confusion and frustration later. Don't forget to see our video on managing audio on this DVD, just in case you store all of your projects in one folder. I'm going to store it on the desktop for now, but this is only a temporary location. You should create a special folder that you store all of your Cubase project folders in on your main hard drive or dedicated audio drive if you have one. Create a folder on the hard drive using a name that is unique for this project. In our case, New Cubase Project is a good name. Make sure the folder you created is selected and press OK. Notice that Cubase opens a project called Untitled1. Basically, we've created a project folder on the hard drive, but we haven't saved our actual Cubase project file yet. Let's do that now. Even though you may not want to save your project now and get working on music, it's very important to take care of this at the beginning, before you get too caught up in the music to remember. Also, you don't want to end up with a bunch of songs called Untitled1, as this will only lead to further confusion and frustration in the future. Choose File, Save or Save As, and then type a name in for the project. I'll call it My First Project. Notice that Cubase automatically selects the right folder for us. Click Save and notice that Untitled1 has changed to our new project name, My First Project. Now let's see how that looks on the hard drive. You can see we are in the folder that we created called New Cubase Project. Cubase has automatically created a folder called Audio. This is where your audio files will be stored for that project. And here's our Cubase project file called My First Project. Cubase will create 3 more folders called Edits, Fades, and Images as you record and edit your project. The Edits folder contains offline processing. The Fades folder contains fade-in, fade-out, and crossfade files. And the Images folder contains images of your audio files so that Cubase can draw your audio waveforms on the screen really fast. Cubase can auto-save for you in case the computer crashes or there is a power outage or some other unlikely event. Go to the File menu, Preferences, and then click on General. You can turn autosave on. Choose a time interval for when the save takes place, and tell Cubase how many different backup files to keep. If you have one selected here, the backup file will automatically be replaced with the last saved one. It's a good idea to add a few more for safety. With our new project up, let's go to Project and select Project Setup. This is where we can define our project settings. The start is the start time of the project. You can have the project start at another time other than 0. The length of the project can be set here. If your project is 3 minutes long, set this to 3 minutes 20 seconds. This lets the overview work and look better. There's no sense in having an extra hour after your project if you're not using it. You'll see this in action in the chapter on the project page. The frame rate is used if you are synchronizing Cubase with external equipment. If Cubase is set to slave, this value is automatically set to the frame rate of the incoming sync signal. If Cubase is set to master, this determines the frame rate of the sent sync signal. The display format sets the global display format used for all rulers and position displays in the program, such as the transport panel, the project page, and editors. However, you can make independent display format selections for the individual rulers of those windows and displays if you like. The display offset offsets the time positions displayed in the ruler, allowing you to compensate for the start position setting. Typically, if you synchronize Cubase to an external source starting at a frame other than 0, you set the start position to this value. However, if you still want the display in Cubase to start at 0, set the display offset to the same value as well. The bar offset works just like the display offset described above, in that it offsets the time position in the ruler by a number of bars, allowing you to compensate for the start position setting. The difference is that the bar offset is only used when the bars and beats display format is selected. The sample rate, record format, and record file type are pretty much self-explanatory. 16-bit 44.1 is CD quality. Anything higher gives you better quality but takes up more space on your hard drive. While 16-bit may be CD quality, setting the bit rate to 24 or 32 will give you even better quality recordings, so long as your sound card supports this. Most of them do today. Here, you can pick what type of file Cubase will record. WAV file tends to be the safest, even for Mac users, since the Mac and PC can both easily play back the WAV files. One thing to note here is that if you choose Broadcast WAV file, you can embed the description, author, and reference in the recorded files. This can be done in the Preferences window under Record, Broadcast WAV submenu. Stereo pan law is a little bit tricky to explain quickly, so we'll discuss this in detail in level 4 of this tutorial series. With all of that said, you're now ready to start working in Cubase on your first project. There are 13 different types of tracks in Cubase. Let's find out how to add some and what they are for. Open up the Tracks project. If you look at the top left of the window, you will notice two buttons grouped together. For now, we are only interested in the second one, the all-new Set Up Windows Layout button. Clicking on this reveals the window layout options. By clicking on any one of the empty boxes, we can choose to either hide or reveal different components of the window layout. Over here, there's a button on the left of the layout window that will reveal the inspector. For now, let's toggle this on so that we can see two distinct gray panels on the left side of the screen. The one on the left is where the inspector appears, which we'll see in a second, and the one on the right is where the tracks go. Right-click on the second gray panel and choose Add MIDI Track. Don't worry about this Browse button here. We'll look at that in the next chapter called Track Presets. You can choose how many MIDI tracks to add here. For now, we're going to leave this set at 1. Now click Add Track. You can see that the track appears here, and the information for that track appears over here. This is known as the inspector. Now, let's add an audio track. This time, go to the Project menu and choose Project, Add Track, Audio. You can choose how many audio tracks you would like to add, and you get a choice of whether the track will be mono or multi-channel, right up to 5.1 surround sound. Click Add Track. Let's add a marker track and move it up to the top. Here we can add markers with the Draw tool and jump to them easily by pressing their corresponding numbers on the transport bar. Markers are good for pointing out different sections in our project, like verse, bridge, and chorus. We'll talk more about markers in level 2 of this series in a chapter called Advanced Markers. Next, add a folder track. Before you do, let's click on the MIDI track. Now add the folder track. As you can see, the folder track was placed below the track we had selected. This is the case for all types of tracks when you add them, except for effects channel tracks and group channel tracks. These tracks are placed at the bottom of your track list, but can later be moved up. You can place tracks in a folder and then close them up. This is useful when you have a lot of tracks and need to keep the drums in one folder, the guitars in another, etc. This can also be extremely useful for orchestral compositions in sorting out the many different sections of the orchestra. Let's draw in some empty parts with the Draw tool. We can color them by clicking on the above color selector when the part is selected. You can also color the track separately by control-clicking on the left side of the track like this. We'll talk more about color later. You can close and open the folder track and still see the audio and MIDI track information underneath. A great preference found under the File menu, Preferences, Editing, Project and Mixer is the Auto Track Color mode. When you make a new track, Cubase will automatically color the track for you. The default works great, but you can choose another selection here. Another good preference is Enlarge Selected Track. Let's turn it on. Now add a few more tracks. We'll shrink them up, and when we select a track, it becomes larger than the other tracks. Let's go back and turn this feature off for now. We can add a ruler track and move it to the top. This allows us to see our timeline in a variety of formats. Now add another one. Have one show seconds and another show time code by right-clicking on the ruler area. Effects channel tracks, group channel tracks, and video tracks are discussed in Level 2 of this series. Instrument tracks are discussed in the Video on MIDI recording, and the Arranger track is discussed in its own chapter coming up. Transpose track and tempo tracks are talked about in Level 3 of this series, with an advanced tempo track chapter in Level 4. And finally, signature tracks are also talked about in Level 4 of this tutorial series.
Select nothing, mouse over to track.
When you right-click on a track, you can choose to select all events on that track, which is better than trying to select them yourself. You can duplicate the track or remove it, which will delete it. If you want multiple tracks removed, select them first on the project page and then right-click and choose Remove Selected Track. Track control settings are discussed in the chapter Customization. Automation is discussed in Level 2 of this series, and track presets are discussed in the next chapter. More information on the inspector is also discussed in Level 2 of this series, although we will touch on various items on the inspector throughout this tutorial. Now that should give you a quick introduction on tracks. Now, let's look at track presets.